He took the hand of his cousin, Ali, put it up, and he said, the same authority that I have upon you, Ali has the same authority upon you.
Where do you see this leading? Do you see it ending? You mentioned that, it didn't happen before since the ninth
the
century.
Arab Spring and so forth, with the youth movements in the Middle East. Are you looking at this really being a demographic more of the youth?
And this is the absolute foundation of the ideological difference between Shias and Sunnis.
Learn about other people's cultures and about the ideas behind their beliefs and just what drives them and what's important to them, I think.
The Sunnis are divided into ideological sects and canonical sects, so are the Shias.
Has your behavior changed? I mean, on a one-on-one with Muslims as you see them, because I know you see them.
So Muhammad was a prophet from the day he was born to Shia Muslims. He was protected from the day he was born.
That America needs to protect and go into these other countries. And that
I have to tell you that I have never been as apprehensive to tackle a subject like this.
Understanding of the faith, as the faith is that women are equal, and all of the women that wear hijab do so as their own, at their own decision. But what I'm curious about in the context of Shia and Sunni is, what are the main differences?
To you, what is the fact on the ground today in the Muslim world and the differences that exist between Shias and Sunnis?
But I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the texture of Islam in other parts of the world, say from Kosovo on the one hand to Nigeria, Somalia on another, or perhaps Indonesia as well.
Yes, yeah.
Hello and welcome. My name is Khalid Sharafuddin. I see so many familiar faces and so many new faces, so welcome all. Islamic Media is a small organization. I have to say this every time because every time we are blessed to see newcomers, so I have to say that again. So if you have heard it before, bear with me. Islamic Media is a very small organization here in the Twin Cities, constituted of 3 persons. The 2 sisters at the door and myself, and an army of volunteers. Hopefully later, when we sit together, you will have one sitting with you during lunch in case you had questions that you did not get to ask during the lecture. So if you can please quickly look through the folder. Everyone, if you have not had your name tag, if you could please put it on. The leaflets there and the material are self-explanatory. You've got an introduction about the speaker, Professor Oda Muhawish. You've got leaflets that carefully picked for you about different subjects related to Islam in general and specifically to the event today, which is about Shia and Sunnah. So we added those couple there to the folder. So after I'm done preaching or talking, I'm going to try not to preach, but I have to say something, of course. Professor Oda Muhawish is going to come forward and give the lecture. And after that, we will have a lengthy session of Q&A. Now, the Q&A does not have to be specifically about the lecture. It can be about any subject you deem necessary that you need to ask. I'm sure you've got plenty of questions if you just watch CNN and Fox for one day. Get all over the news every hour. It's hard to keep up. Before I used to record every time. Oh, there's something about Islam, I record it. And now it's like, oh, I give up. There's so many. I can't. So it can be also about political questions, because religion and politics and history kind of go hand in hand. You cannot really separate them. I want you guys to know that our organization focuses on you guys. You are the main focus, non-Muslims. You are the main focus of Islamic Media. We've got plenty of Muslim organizations that focus on Muslims. We've got a handful that do not. And so we're trying to fill that gap. So come forward anytime. You have a question, you have a topic, shoot us an email. You've got the email there anytime. I mean, if you even want to chat, do it. Some people who know us very well, they know that we like that very much. So don't hold anything back. And if you have any questions, again, that you think people are going to be offended, not offended, don't worry about that. We got used to it. I think that's all I have. So without further ado, present to you Professor Oda Muhaush.
Well, thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum, peace be with you. I have been speaking in front of audiences for about 30 years. And I've spoken in front of much larger audiences, smaller audiences and everything. I've spoken about politics, religion, business, leadership, you name it. I have to tell you that I have never been as apprehensive to tackle a subject like this as a subject like this. And the reason is simple. I grew up in Jordan. I remember going to grade school. From the get-go, from grade school, we were never allowed to discuss the issue of Shia. I grew up as a Sunni Muslim. Never speak about the subject of Shia. At that time, it was easy. The explanation was easy. It was their different group. They don't exist in Jordan, and not much derogatory statements. So there was really no need to tackle the subject. We didn't have internet. We didn't have easily accessible media, so we didn't have many questions. But then as we grew older and we started asking questions, we were told, Shias are heretics, they're non-Muslims, just don't deal with them. I grew up, and in my late teens, early 20s, I've decided to do research, and I did a lot of research. I decided to change my outlook in Islam and call myself a Shia Muslim. To my surprise, I was told by many Shia Muslims, I'm still told by many Shia Muslims not to tackle the subject of Shia Sunni Islam because it's divisive, it can lead to bloodshed, it can lead to strife between Muslims. Now, because I spent the first or early years of my life in Jordan, and then I came when I was a teenager to the US, I don't really have a prepackaged personality. In other words, I don't think like a Middle Easterner, nor do I think like, an American who was born and raised here. So I formed my own personality, and part of that personality is to find it strange not to have the complete freedom to talk about any ideology out there. What is the big deal? Why can't you discuss issues that are, at the end of the day, thought issues, thought differences? Why can't we talk about Christianity openly? Why can't we talk about Islam openly? Why cannot I criticize things that don't make sense to me? That's that reaction that I still get from Shias and Sunnis alike is still strange to me, but I do understand it. I do understand it because it is used by political powers to create conflict between Shias and Sunnis. Shias and Sunnis share many things. They believe in the same God. They have the same prophet. They have the same book, which is the Quran. They pray together. They do the pilgrimage to the same place. They have almost the same rules when it comes to charity, fasting, doing good, avoiding evil, doing all that stuff. So what seems strange to me is that we have so many things in common, but yet we were perceived and we are perceived to have a lot of differences, and now those perception or that perception of those differences is truly being manifested and is coming to the forefront in the ground in the Middle East and now around the globe. So my goal today is to try to be purely an academic, to explain to you historical, some theological differences, and if I remember, because I will forget, so some of you have to remind me at the end, to try to explain to you what is the fact on the ground today in the Muslim world and the differences that exist between Shias and Sunnis. Who are the voices that are speaking for Shias? Who are the voices that are speaking for Sunnis? And how is that affecting our own politics here in the United States? If I can do that in 1 hour, 45 minutes, hooray to me, right? So what I'm going to try to do is first explain to you the Sunni perspective of Islam. There are 85% of the Muslims are Sunni Muslims. Okay? And I'm not going to focus very much on the differences, intra-Sunni differences, or the different Sunni sects, unless it's really necessary. I'll just highlight that quickly. So this is how a Sunni individual, a devout Sunni individual, looks at Islam. Looks at Prophet Muhammad. Prophet Muhammad was a great child. He was an orphan. His father died either before or 2 years after he was born, depending on the sources that you read. He was born to a great and noble family as an orphan. He was brought up by a milk mother during the first years of his life. Was a great child. He was a human being. At the end of the day, he was a human being. But he wasn't just like any other human being. He was a noble human being. There was something special about this child. So, honest, noble, generous, known as the trustworthy, always told the truth. Yet he made mistakes. He was a human being at the end of the day. The mistakes were always minor. Mistakes that are considered mistakes only in Muslim eyes, such as one time going to a party where there is dance and music, but he fell asleep. God protected him. Stories like this are prevalent in the literature, in the Sunni literature. At the age of 40 years old, he goes up to the mountain as he had always have done before. And when he's there, he encounters an event. A being comes to him and tells him to recite. And he tells the being, I do not recite. I'm unlearned. I cannot read and write. This being tells him that 3 times, squeezes him, and tells him that he's the angel Gabriel, and that he has a revelation from God. And he reveals to him the very first word that becomes the foundation of all Islamic teachings, which is recite, read, contemplate, understand, all encompassed in one word, which is Iqra. So Muhammad, at 40 years old, has this encounter. He goes down from the mountain. He tells his wife, Khadija, who was older than him, about this event, and he is flustered. He doesn't know what this experience is. So Khadija approaches her friend, a man by the name of Waraqah, who was a devout Christian, and she says, this happened with Muhammad, what is it? And Waraqah comes and asks the Prophet a series of questions, and he tells him, you are indeed a prophet like Moses. And the revelation starts from there. So throughout his life, for the first 3 years, the Prophet conveys the message of Islam in secret to his people, to his nearest of kin, so he can strengthen or found a foundation for Islam. And he has some followers, mainly poor, slaves, women, the downtrodden, the oppressed. Naturally, they are the people who would look for an out of the status quo or the situation that they were in. Then some major leaders of the tribes around him start to embrace Islam after he announces, after 3 years, he announces his message publicly. And those companions were very smart, very wise, knew the environment around them, knew how to speak, knew how to approach the other tribes, knew how to approach the other powers around Arabia. So they naturally become advisors to him. They become his disciples. And in many instances where he spoke, sometimes he would say, I have Quran that I'm delivering to you. So they take the Quran. Of course, they don't question it because it's a revelation from God. But sometimes he would speak about other issues where they would challenge him. And indeed, at some points, they would oppose him. A good example of that, this is in Sunni literature, was when the Prophet was going to conduct the first pilgrimage from Medina, when he went to Mecca. On the way, they stopped at a place that's called Hudaybiyah. And there, they started negotiating with the people of Mecca. The people of Mecca wanted them to turn back and come back next year. The Prophet wanted to negotiate for a peace settlement. And part of the elements of the peace agreement that they finally agreed to was that if a person who is a Muslim chooses to leave Islam, they can go back to Mecca. But if a person of Meccan origin wants to become a Muslim, the Muslims would have to turn him back. It seemed very unfair to some of the companions of the Prophet. So they opposed the Prophet. They said, this is not fair. How can we do this if this is a revelation from God? The moral of this, or what I want you to come out of this, is that there were some companions who challenged the Prophet. They didn't see necessarily as that everything that he utters came from God, but that sometimes the Quran came from God, but sometimes he would speak of his own and it was his own opinions. And there are many, many other examples in Sunni literature that speak about how the companions would challenge the Prophet, would oppose him. And some Sunni literature, although it's not prevalent, would say that God sometimes would side with the companions in some instances. So the Prophet, in one of those instances where the companions disagreed with the Prophet or interpreted what he said as a personal opinion, was 2 months before his death. The Prophet gathered the pilgrims who were with him, 120,000, some say 112,000, over 100,000, either way. He gathered them around in a place where there is a well, a spring, and he spoke to them and he reminded them of all the teachings that he had taught them. And he asked them, do I not have authority given to me upon you by God? And they said, yes. Then he said, he took the hand of his cousin, Ali, put it up, and he said, the same authority that I have upon you, Ali has the same authority upon you. So they paid allegiance to him. So this became the highlight of the ideological difference between Shias and Sunnis, the ideological difference, and I'll explain it a bit more. But I'm still continuing to explain to you the Sunni perspective and understanding of Islam, the history of Islam, some of the teachings of Islam, some of the reactions to the Prophet and who Prophet Muhammad was. 2 months later, the Prophet was in his deathbed, and now he says to people who were gathered around a room that he was staying in, he said, bring me a pen and paper so that I can write for you the will I had conveyed for you before. For if you follow this well, you'd never be divided, you'd never have strife amongst each other, and you will have a successful society. I'm loosely translating what was said. Well, one of the companions who was sitting there, he said, the man is overcome by pain. We don't need to write something where he's overcome by pain. We don't need to write that because we have the book of God, the Quran. It's enough for us. The Muslims were divided as a reaction. Some of them said, no, he's a prophet of God. Whatever he says is from God. And some said, he's a prophet of God, but he's a human being too. And they left the Prophet. The Prophet died. And of course, naturally, Muslims being just another community, like every other community, had a division amongst themselves. The people of Medina said, okay, we want to be the leaders of the Muslims afterwards. The people of Mecca, led by the man who said that the man is overcome by pain, whose name is Umar, who was the second caliph. He was accompanied by Abu Bakr, who became the first caliph, said, no, we are from the same tribe as the Prophet, therefore we are more worthy of leading Islam, and you are our brothers. There was another group who were from the same family as the Prophet, and some of the people who took their side, who said 2 months ago, we've heard the Prophet say that Ali has the same authority upon you as I do, therefore he should be the caliph. This is the seed of the difference between Shias and Sunnis. The people who prevailed were the first caliph, Abu Bakr, the second caliph, Umar, and their side of understanding of the events and who the Prophet was. They became the caliphs. Abu Bakr was a caliph for 2 years. Umar was a caliph for 10 to 12 years, depending on the text that you read. Now, a series of events happened from there. Okay, and I'm still present to you the perspective of my Sunni brothers of the events. 3 days after the death of the Prophet, the burial of the Prophet, Abu Bakr becoming the first caliph. And literally, by the way, the word caliph means the heir to. Okay, someone, for instance, if President Obama was president for life, God forbid, even though I voted for him, right? Right? If he became president for life and he died, then Biden would become the caliph, right? Which would be even worse, right? Everybody's shaking. I think even Democrats are shaking their heads. We don't want that situation. So anyway, so Prophet Muhammad died. So who becomes his heir to lead in the Muslims? It was Abu Bakr first, 2 years, then he died. Then Umar became the caliph. 3 days after they took over, they sent the first mission, military mission outside of Arabia. And then subsequently, over the next 12 years, and in fact, over the next several hundred years, Muslims continued to send military inquisitions into surrounding areas. This is the beginning of how Sunni communities look at the interpretation of the history of Islam. Within 15 years, within 15 years, the Muslims were able to conquer, bring down the Byzantine Empire, the Persian Empire, and all little statelets that were around. It must have been a miracle. It must have been a sign from God that we are supposed to do this, and it's a good thing. And indeed, some of the things that happened supported their view. For instance, in the Battle of Yarmouk, which signaled the end of the Byzantine Empire in the Levant, there were 20,000 Muslim soldiers who were fighting 200,000 Byzantine soldiers. One of the nights, the Byzantine soldiers were asleep on the banks of the Yarmouk River, which is the border between Syria and Jordan on the western part. So they were sleeping there. A mudslide happened. 54,000 Byzantine soldiers drowned in the river overnight. Western literature says that the 54,000 soldiers were smitten by the Lord. Muslim literature says this was a miracle from God who was siding with us. Okay, so the Muslims were fighting in Qadisiyah against the Persians, and swarms of bees came and attacked the Persian armies, and the Muslims won. So this must be a sign of God. In Egypt, the Muslims, with a few hundred soldiers, conquered a country that was a very powerful country, very rich, agriculturally rich, historically rich. Egypt is known. Must have been a miracle of God. So whatever they were doing it for the cause of God, for the sake of God, and everything was great. And the Muslims continued their conquest up westwards in North Africa, then westwards from modern-day Turkey into Europe, and Islam expanded greatly, and many, many people embraced the faith of Islam. Must have been a miracle. Throughout the process, at one point, the Muslims have gone through several versions of Muslim state. The first one was the Caliphate. Then after that, it was the Umayyads. And the Umayyads specialized in conquering and opening land. That was their specialty. But then they were succeeded by the Abbasids, who didn't care as much about conquering land as much as building cities, building infrastructure, translating literature of the Greeks, Eastern literature, every book that they can get their hands on. And at one point they passed a law that if you translate or write a book, when you are done, your book will be evaluated. If it's accepted, they will weigh it and they will give you its weight in gold. Isn't that great? During their time, tremendous amounts of literature were translated. Debate, intellectual debate took place. Baghdad, who the Abbasids actually built in 746, built it out of nothing, from the ground up, became the capital, intellectual capital of the world. If you went to Baghdad, you're a smart person. If you studied in Baghdad, you're a smart person. They had the greatest libraries. So during the Abbasids' time, there were many people who were speaking on behalf of Islam. This is important, and if you can stay with me with this, how we deal with those decisions today This is really a key important point. So the Abbasids issued a decree that only 6 individuals were to speak on behalf of Islam. And they were named individuals, Abu Hanifa, Malik, Imam Shafi, Ahmad ibn Hanbal. You don't have to remember the names. And they chose them very carefully, actually. They chose a person in Medina, which is the hotbed of Islam. They chose Imam Malik. They chose Imam Shafi. They chose Abu Hanifa. Each one was in a different region. And when you look at their books, you see a different jurisprudence that applies to the time and the place that they were in. There were 2 others who were abandoned. One of them was Awza'i, who is very well known, very famous to scholars, but most common people do not even recognize the name. And another one. So by state decree, only these people can speak on behalf of Islam. Okay? Years later, the Crusades come, they did what they did, and Saladin comes and fights him back. They abandon the Holy Land, and Saladin issues another decree, which is in Egypt and in all the Ayyubids' land where he controlled, only 4 scholars can be followed, who were the same scholars that were chosen many hundred years before by the Abbasids. He didn't decide to choose new scholars to follow. Today, the Sunni canonical sects are based on those 4 scholars. So if you ask most Sunnis, they would say that either they are Shafi'i, Hanbali, Hanafi, or Maliki. Okay, and fast forward to today. So today we have 2 authorities that talk on behalf of Sunni Islam for the most part. One is in Egypt, which is Al-Azhar, which is truly the mainstream of Sunni Islam, historically and ideologically. And then, of course, you have the Salafi form of Islam, which is based out of Medina and Mecca of Saudi Arabia, and controlled by a family, a descendants of a man by the name of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. And there are a lot of conflicts, ideological conflicts between the 2 that we'll speak about in a minute. So this is the Sunni perspective of the history of Islam. I'm going to give you a Shia perspective of the history of Islam, starting again with Prophet Muhammad. So the Prophet Muhammad, was born a prophet. He spoke in the cradle, much like Jesus spoke in the cradle according to the Quran. He was protected by God, like God protected Moses when his mother threw him in the river, in the cradle in the river. He was protected and given revelation, much like Abraham was given revelation when he was a baby and protected from the Pharaoh of his time. So Muhammad was a prophet from the day he was born to Shia Muslims. He was protected from the day he was born. Every word that he uttered was a word from God. Everything that he did, he was guided by the angels of God. Therefore, these stories that Prophet Muhammad sometimes did things that would appear to be mistakes are rejected outright. Now, I want to emphasize that both Shias and Sunnis say that the Prophet is infallible. The disagreement is on what is he infallible about. Sunnis say that he is infallible in all matters of faith. Shias say that he is infallible in everything because everything is a matter of faith. Okay? And this is the absolute foundation of the ideological difference between Shias and Sunnis. For if the Prophet said, Ali has the same authority on you as I do, then who are we to question that? Now, this is the Shia perspective. Therefore, if somebody violated this, they have violated the rule of the Prophet. And when the companions opposed the Prophet and didn't allow him to, or didn't allow for his will to be written, they have created a great discourse, and that was the main discourse between Shias and Sunnis that we experience today. So now the perspective about what happened after the Prophet's death. The Muslim Inquisitions. It is true Muslims conquered all of these lands. Of course, Shias take their jurisprudence and understanding and reaction to every event naturally then from Ali, the Prophet's cousin, who the Prophet assigned as his heir according to Shia Muslims. And if that is the case, we go back to what Ali said about these conquests. We find that Ali had prevented his followers, known as Shias. Shias literally means partisans or followers. And let me explain the meaning. This is a good opportunity to explain the difference linguistically between Shia and Sunni. Shia means followers or partisans of someone or something. So today, the partisans of the Democratic Party are Democrats. The partisans of the Republican Party are Republicans. The partisans of gun control are the partisans of gun control. The partisans of saying you can buy a gun and have a bazooka at your home. I'll skip that one. Okay? So you get the idea, you get the idea of what Shia means. Sunni means someone who follows the conduct of someone. Okay? So Sunnis is defined as those who follow the conduct of the Prophet and his companions. Okay? So now Imam Ali looks at those conquests as a violation of the teachings of the Prophet. They say that why didn't the Prophet try to conquer these lands? We look at the teachings of the Prophet and we find that he didn't encourage the conquer of these lands. They bring up their own arguments, as do Sunnis from the Quran, that Islam does not allow for conquering others' lands. Islam allows for defending your own land, but not conquering other lands. So Shias look at the conquests of the lands in 15 years as a violation of the spirit of Islam, and they say although God took the side of Muslims in these battles, as exhibited by these miracles that I talked about, the overarching impression or reaction that we have is that these battles were unfair. And they question some of the miracles. For instance, Egypt, which was conquered by a few hundred soldiers, Muslim soldiers, they say it was natural it would be conquered. Not a problem. Because the Byzantines were occupiers of Egypt. The Coptic Christians were the occupied of Egypt. Coptic Christians had a great relationship with the Arabs, even before Islam, and that relationship became strengthened during the time of the Prophet. The Prophet married one of the women from the Coptic Christians. So Coptic Christians solicited the help of Muslim armies to come and fight the occupiers, and that's indeed what happened. So you had an uprising from within the Coptic community that solicited the help of the Muslims, and the Byzantines were defeated. After Egypt was freed from Byzantine occupation, Pope Benjamin, who was the head of the Coptic community in Egypt at that time, he was the Coptic Pope around the world actually, conducted a mass, very large mass, in the largest church in Alexandria, Egypt, praying for the Muslim armies to go and conquer the rest of North Africa and free it from the Byzantine occupiers. And in fact, he and a delegation with him traveled with the Muslim armies to the frontiers and prayed for them to be victorious. And we find many stories like this as Muslims advanced, that many Christian communities viewed their brother Muslim communities as occupiers, and they solicited Muslim help. At that time, Christians didn't view Muslims as enemies or as different, because Muslims did and still do revere Jesus as the Messiah, as infallible, as having risen up and is seated next to the throne of God, and as will come at the end of time to establish the kingdom of God. So they didn't see much differences as we do today. The differences are still the same, but we look at them differently. So they didn't view Muslims as people who would defy the faith. So that's why Shias say that some of these conquests took place very quickly. Now, the Muslim armies levied taxes on people, and the taxes, Shias say that those taxes were unfair, but they're explainable. The taxes were called the jizya. So when Muslim armies conquered a land, the armies there, the Muslim armies said, hey, we want to continue conquering other lands, but we know that you are non-Muslims, you don't believe in our cause, therefore you have to pay a tax, basically a protection tax. Ironically, today there are over 60 countries around the world that allow you to avoid the draft if you pay $10,000, for instance. And we could have that law in the future too. We're a capitalist system. We probably, if a politician hears me say this, they will say, this is a great opportunity to take more money from our young people, right? So that was the tax. That was the idea behind it. Well, naturally, what happened is that a lot of people wanted to avoid taxes. So they would say, we're Muslims now. Although really, they really were not. They never believed in the faith of Islam. But their children grew up going to the mosque, going to Muslim schools, and grew up as Muslims. These are facts. Now, this narrative that I just gave you, let me come back to this. Continue on. At the beginning of, or the end of the Khilafah, beginning of the Umayyads, there were strife between the Muslims. The fourth Caliph ended up to be the cousin of the Prophet, who was Ali. There were 3 defining battles that took place against him. One was led by the Prophet's wife, Aisha, in a battle that's called the Camel, because she rode a camel and people fought around her to defend the camel. And Imam Ali fought against her because they fought over some parts of Iraq, some treasuries, and some ideological issues too. Not the place to explain all of them. That created a great division between the Muslims. Then Muawiyah, who was the governor of Syria, decided to rebel against Imam Ali and accuse him of murdering the 3rd Caliph. And of course, Shias and Sunnis today exonerate Ali from that. There is not a Muslim who says, yeah, Ali had anything to do with it. Nonetheless, Muawiyah defied him and fought him in a fierce battle that's called Siffin that took 80 days to fight. So every night they would fight. Many, many Muslims died in that battle. And then there were another battle that was a rebellion where both Muawiyah and Ali, ironically, fought against the rebels. But they weren't allies. They were enemies, nonetheless. So after that strife, there was nothing. Shias and Sunnis, Shias became the minority. The Umayyads won. Imam Ali was killed, martyred, while he was praying in the mosque. And Shias became the minority, and they became the oppressed minority. The Umayyads had laws where if somebody is suspected of being a Shia, then his house and 6 surrounding houses of their neighbors would all be destroyed if they're suspected of being a Shia. So Shias naturally go underground. When the Abbasids came, they continued that policy of oppression because Shias have all along said that the Khilafah, the Umayyads, the Abbasids all violated the Prophet's teachings by not allowing Imam Ali and the Imams after him, who the Prophet named, to be the Imams. Therefore, all these governments are illegitimate. This led to political opposition that these governments didn't want to have, and at some point, in some rare instances, to military opposition, where the Shias could muster up some weapons and enough soldiers to fight a battle, and they're almost always lost because they were overwhelmed by the superpowers of that time. Now remember, the Umayyads and the Abbasids became like the United States today. And the Shias were a minority that would be oppressed by a superpower of that time. Okay? So the Shias became oppressed, and because they were oppressed, a number of things that naturally happened with them. One is that Shias became very well versed on the ideological, theological arguments between them and Sunnis. Sunnis, being the majority, didn't feel that they have that need. So at that time, and this is the issue today, you find most Sunnis to be very uneducated about truly who Shias are, while you find most Shias to know exactly what Sunnis believe and know the arguments why they believe that being a Shia is the correct form of Islam. Nonetheless, it stayed for the most part, since that time, it remained at the intellectual level. When the Abbasids named those 6 scholars, and they said only these 6 scholars can be followed, The Shias were not named amongst them. So the Shias naturally had their Imam. This happened during the 6th Imam's time. So the Shias continued to follow the 6th Imam. They developed their own jurisprudence, their own ideology, their own theology. They continued to go on that path. And we had a complete separation at this point between Shia and Sunni schools. And therefore, the Shias had schools in Iraq, Najaf, Karbala, and in Iran, in Qum primarily. And this remains to be the case today, where Shias, scholarly Shia centers are in Najaf, Karbala, Iraq, and in Qum, Iran. That physical separation naturally led to the physical separation of the communities for the most part. And now Shias became concentrated in Iran, which converted to Shia Islam during the 15th century. They were all Sunnis during the 16th century. And Iraq were the shrines of the first Imam and the third Imam and 5 other Imams. So the Shias concentrated around them. Some communities converted to Shia Islam in Lebanon, and today they're about, I believe, 40% of Lebanon is Shia Muslims. And in the eastern province of Saudi Arabia, 20% of Saudis are Shias today. They concentrate in those areas. In Medina, there is a community that still is a Shia community, very strong. And in Bahrain, Qatar, and in those areas. Azerbaijan is almost entirely Shia, and in some of the eastern states of the Soviet Union are still Shias. Many of them are still Shias. So that separation further alienated Shias and Sunnis from understanding each other. And when you have that separation, stereotypes, false impressions or false images and lies happen about the other side. It was, at one point, I had a friend who was a Palestinian Shia, he's a convert, who told me that they were told when they were little that Shias had tails like dogs. And while we laugh at it, it's sad. It's a sad statement. So now fast forward to our time, where we had a Salafi movement that was initiated in Saudi Arabia by the British in the 17th century. And when the Saudis became wealthy through oil, through our big cars and big SUVs and everything like that, they funded this organization that's called the World Muslim Organization for Propagation, Rabitat al-Alam al-Islami. That organization's goal was not to convert Shias, was not to really convert non-Muslims to Islam, but primarily was to convert other Sunnis to the Saudi brand of Islam, which is Salafi Islam. And their approach is to go to mosques around the world. Today they have 4,000 missions around the world, and go to those mosques and teach them Sunni Islam as they understand it. And now we have that tension between Egypt's Al-Azhar and the Salafis over truly what is Islam. So now the Shias have something that's called marja, somebody who they refer to as a scholar. So the average Shia would have to follow one of the top scholars. Today we have about 8 of them who are qualified. Very stringent rules of study, a minimum of 20 years of study in theological seminaries. For a lack of a better term, think of them as popes. Okay, they study very hard, then they are approved by their peers as being qualified to be followed. So we don't have smoke, that smoke, white smoke, but they are endorsed after a very stringent vetting process. Once that person is allowed to call himself or herself a reference, then they issue the book of laws that's called the Risala, or the message, that literally contains everything from how you pray, how what to eat and what not to eat, basically laws, jurisprudence. Part of this is that we as Shia followers or devotees, is that we cannot take things into our own hands without really understanding the legal implications and getting the permission from this marja, this pope. Okay? It sounds like a dictatorship. It has its great benefits, as I'll explain in a minute. Now, the Sunni Islam, because the Muslim state was dismantled during the Ottomans, do not have that authority of reference. So the scholar, the Sunni scholar, is viewed as a lawyer. How do I have a question about my faith. What's the answer to this question? So they ask him, they give him an opinion, and because you have many lawyers, you might get a lot of different answers. That creates a lot of problems. I'll give you an example. What happened in Boston? So this man, the older brother, Tamerlan, I think his name was. So he goes to a mosque, he opposes the imams. These are Sunni mosques. He opposes the imams. He says, we should not celebrate Thanksgiving. It's an innovation. We should not speak about Martin Luther King because he's non-Muslim. How could we take him as a role model for us? And the imams asked him to leave. They couldn't convince him to be quiet and listen like everybody else and have his own opinion, but they asked him to leave. Now, in a Shia community, the person might have his opinion and might state her opinion as well, and there will be a debate about that, but then they would all go back, the imam of the mosque and the person who has a different opinion, they'd go back to the reference, to the marja, and they say, what is your opinion? And the marja would say, this is the opinion. And of course, Thanksgiving is the greatest holiday we have in the US. We have turkey every year, right? And Martin Luther King is definitely one of the greatest leaders that we have. And taking wisdom from him is something that is great for us. So that's the answer that he would have gotten from a true scholar. That young man, if he had the right guidance, he would not have done what he has done. Obviously, there are many other things that were wrong with him. I don't want to focus on him. But that process is very important for us to understand. Now, Shias and Sunnis did not have a bloody strife between them. The last time they had any conflict was in 1049, beginning of the 11th century, 1049, in Baghdad. Families fought. Families fought. And because the families, one was Shia, one was Sunni, of course, their extended families, their tribes got involved, and 40 Shias were killed. 1049. There is no other strife between Shias and Sunnis until we went into Iraq. I don't blame the US for the strife that happened between Shias and Sunnis. I know many Muslims say that the US wanted that bloodshed to happen between the Sunnis and Shias. I don't believe that it's strategically to the benefit of the US to do that, nor I believe it's a US strategy to do that. I think there was a vacuum that existed. I think there were some people who didn't want Iraq to become a democratic state, and therefore they decided to play this card, Shia-Sunni card, where up to this day, more than 1 million Shias and Sunnis were killed. Shias and Sunnis are not used to killing each other. They're used to butting heads ideologically wherever they can find each other, but they are not used to killing each other. Now, today, unfortunately, that's not the case. Today, Shias in Pakistan are killed, buses are stopped, they're killed just because they're Shias. Shias in Afghanistan are killed just because they are Shias. Shias in Iraq are killed constantly in their mosques and shrines just because they're Shias. And the situation goes on. The vast majority of Sunnis, the vast majority of Sunni scholars would condemn these killings. There are some who are Al-Qaeda leaning, who are Wahhabi leaning, who would endorse and condone these kind of killings as viewing Shias as heretics and pose a strategic challenge to the Sunnis. I think I covered most of the issues that I want to cover. I hope you have a lot of questions. I'm supposed to continue speaking for some reason. They want to get the microphone, right? So if you have, I hope you have questions, because I know probably you have issues that I didn't cover. The issue is very sensitive, and I want to tell you right now, if any of you are Islamic scholars or Shias or Sunnis who want to turn this into a debate, I'm not going to do it. Okay? I will not, because we all have that tendency to do it. If you want to debate me, we can debate over coffee. Okay? On one condition, that at the end of the debate, you give me a hug and I give you a hug. Okay? I'll take your questions. Go ahead.
Thank you for the informative talk.
Sure.
I have one probably rather simple question. I don't know if the right word to talk about Sunni and Shia is a sect or
Yes.
not. Would that be proper to call it? What about, aren't there some other sects within the Islamic community like Wahhabi and
I
others?
knew you were
How
going
do-
to.
how
I
do
knew
they
somebody
fit
was going to
into
get
the
to
picture?
that, right? Okay, so talk about Sunnis being the majority. The Sunnis are divided into ideological sects and canonical sects. So are the Shias. I'll explain both sides. Okay, so within Sunni Islam, you have canonically you have Shafi'i, who are, for the most part are in Egypt, Jordan, Syria, those areas. Okay. Shafi'i, canonical sects, legal sects, okay? Slight differences in what you can eat, what you cannot eat, how you pray, things of that sort. You have Hanafi, and the Hanafis are the number one Muslim community when it comes to numbers. The reason behind that is the Ottoman Empire made that the legal sect of the state. So, of course, it was taught in schools. Most countries in the world, and the 54 Muslim countries today, have Hanafi laws when it comes to implementing the Sharia, okay? And they're all over the Muslim world today. You have the Malikis, who are primarily in North Africa and the Western African coast, okay? And then you have the Hanbalis, who are estimated to be 65 million. The Hanbalis canonically, they're in Saudi Arabia for the most part and the Persian Gulf. Now they're spreading into other areas. Now, ideologically, Sunnis are divided into Ash'aris, okay, where let's just move away from the law itself, but ideologically, and things how, what is Allah? Can you see God? You know? Can you see God? Is God visible? Can God, what are the characteristics of God? Very fine details that most people get lost in as soon as they start talking about them, okay? So you have the Ash'aris. The vast majority of Sunnis today are either Ash'aris or Maturidi. Maturidi was a student of Ash'ari. So many people, Turkey for instance, is Hanafi Maturidi for the most part. Okay? I know details that even most Muslims, Shias and Sunnis don't know, right? And then the third ideological sect that exists is called Ahlul Hadith, the people of tradition. People of tradition are people who take the Prophet's tradition at face value. They don't try to interpret it beyond that. They don't try to interpret the Quran beyond the language itself. For instance, there is a verse in the Quran where God says, God has the upper hand. Yadullahi fawqa aydihim. God's hand is above their hands, right? In English, it's God has the upper hand. Therefore, it's not up. They say it's not up to us to interpret this, because therefore God must have a hand. Hanafis, Maturidis say, the Maturidis and Ash'aris say, no, this means power. And it's a debate. Both have their own way of looking at it, okay? Today, the Salafis are people of tradition when it comes to ideology, and Hanbalis when it comes to the canon. Salafis, Wahhabis and Salafis are interchangeable word. They like to call themselves Salafi, therefore I'll call them Salafi as well. Wahhabi, they're called Wahhabi because today the leaders of the Salafi movement in Saudi Arabia, by British decree in the 17th century, have to all be descendants of a man by the name of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, or his title was the Sheikh. Sheikh literally means minister, okay? So the children of the minister. So now the Grand Mufti of Saudi Arabia, all of them are whatever his name, blah, 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 al-Sheikh. That means he's a descendant of a Sheikh, okay? So all of them are Ahlul Hadith, literalists in their interpretation, and, Hanbalis in their law. The Shias, the vast majority are 12ers, like me. They believe in 12 imams, and they say that like Moses had 12 imams, Jesus had 12 disciples, 12 imams, we call them imams, these are just English or Hebrew or whatever words that we use, right, or Arabic words. So Prophet Muhammad did have 12 imams. Each sect, by the way, in Islam bring their evidence for their accuracy and righteousness. And the Shias also have Zaydis, who were in Yemen. Some of the Shias here were Zaydis and now they chose to become 12ers. And they have Ismailis, who are in India and Africa for the most part. Did I answer your question? You took notes? You studied for the quiz? Okay. Any other questions? You have written questions. You can ask me if you want. Go ahead.
Give a little more detail about the those first battles, or the one you had. You mentioned the Aisha
Yes.
battle,
Mhm.
but could you just cover that period
Yes.
a little more?
Yes, absolutely. I have to tell you, nothing in the world irks our Sunni brothers than speaking about this battle. The vast majority of our Sunni brothers have very little knowledge about it, although it's in all of the literature, Sunni literature, Shia literature, and the accounts are for the most part the same. Okay, Aisha was one of the Prophet's wives. All right, so Aisha was the daughter of the first caliph, Abu Bakr. When Imam Ali was chosen by the community to be the fourth caliph, she disagreed with that choice. She led an army along with two of the companions of the Prophet, Talha and Zubayr, where they attacked Ali's governor in Basra, in Iraq. They killed him and they took the treasury because they deemed Ali not to be a legitimate caliph. Imam Ali decided that, well, he was obligated by God to defend the community, therefore he led an army against them too. And the battle was a quick battle, it took half a day. Back then it was a quick battle because they had camels and horses and probably a couple of donkeys too, you know. So they fought a battle there, and Aisha's army was defeated, and the battle was called the Battle of the Camel. And Aisha, when she was defeated, she wasn't harmed. Imam Ali took her and enlisted 200 women soldiers to deliver her back to Medina, and told her, stay there in peace, but don't get involved in politics. So that's the Battle of Jamal. It's called the Battle of the Camel.
Their celebration or commemoration.
Oh, thank you. I completely forgot about that. Yes, yes. So now, when the Umayyads took over, you know, Ali was assassinated, the Umayyads took over. There was a truce that was signed between the second Imam, who was the son of Ali, Hassan, Imam Hassan. Muawiyah, one of the bands of the truce is that when Muawiyah dies, that he will leave it to the Muslims to choose their own leader. Well, Muawiyah didn't do that. When Muawiyah was wounded, and then actually he was cured from the wound, and he became later ill. As he was dying, he assigned his son, the oldest son Yazid, as the next caliph. Okay? Well, the third Imam, who was the second son of Imam Ali, was the right heir to the throne, according to Shia understanding, and many Sunnis actually agree with them on this. So Hussein refused to pay allegiance to him, and went to Iraq to his partisans, to his father's partisans with 72 members of his family and companions. And Yazid surrounded his family and soldiers, or Hussein's family and soldiers, with 4,000 soldiers. They were soldiers who had besieged which city? As Byzantine city. I can't think of it right now. So Yazid called them back. He said they were some rebels. He didn't tell them that they were the family of the Prophet, the grandson of the Prophet, or anything like that. They surrounded them and killed them in a bad massacre, and that's known as Ashura. It's the 10th day of the first month of the Muslim year, and it happened in a place, in a desert back then, that became known as Karbala. That's why Shias, and for a long, long time, Sunnis would commemorate that sad event with a lot of poetry, a lot of reenactment of what happened. And the reason that they did the reenactments is that many of the Muslims who were there, were back then, were illiterate. So they would reenact to them what happened. They would tell them poetry because, the Muslims and Arabs until this day love poetry more than anything else. So those customs continued on until this day. Now we see that the Sunnis are moving away from those customs, and the Shias are the ones who are keeping them up. But it wasn't really the defining moment for the division of Shia and Sunni. As many people claim, that's not true at all, historically and academically. He was the son. He was the son-in-law. That's correct. Yes. There are a lot of facts, and you're a student of history. Great. That's true. Ali was also the son-in-law of the Prophet. He was married to his daughter Fatima. That's true. But it's irrelevant really when it comes to the ideological or theological division between Shias and Sunnis. Shias and Sunnis revere Fatima a great deal as being the mistress of all women, as the Prophet said. How Abu Bakr and Umar treated Fatima became an issue between Shias and Sunnis, but I didn't want to give so much details about that. Go ahead.
You mentioned the places where the Sunnis are killing Shias. Are there places where the Shias are killing the Sunnis?
Good question.
And where do you see this leading? Do you see it ending? You mentioned that it didn't happen before since the 9th century.
Yes. In Syria, there is a very small Shia sect that's called the Alawids. Okay. They are in control of the country. There are some reports that the Alawids have killed Sunnis. I don't know about them. I cannot figure out what is going on in Syria when it comes to what's going on the ground, because there are so many facts, so many lies actually, and so many news reports, and what a convoluted conflict. There are obviously no Shias killing Sunnis in Pakistan because they're a minority. They would be crushed. And in Iraq, the Grand Ayatollah Sistani issued a decree that if a Shia is killed, then reprisal is forbidden, it's a sin. And he said, if my own children are killed by Sunnis, I forbid anyone to take revenge for them. He viewed it as a plot to divide the Muslims there. And he said the only way we can win the plot is by prohibiting the counter attacks, if you would. Where I see this going, God knows. It is scary. It is very, very scary. See, what is happening right now are a number of factors, a number of defining factors of what could happen. And I'll mention them, and we can all draw a conclusion together what could happen. One of the greatest blessings that God really bestowed upon us, I know you're going to laugh, but I really mean it, is Google. Seriously. In the past, and I'll give you some examples. In the past, Catholics, how many Catholics are here? Okay? Now, Catholics were told, don't read the Bible, we'll read it for you. The priest will read it for you. Villages, a Christian village, thought that the other village was evil because they didn't interact with them, and they could have been Lutheran, or they could have been whatever, right? And until this day, in Minnesota, and you probably know where exactly, there are some churches, Lutheran churches, who would not pray with other Lutherans because they're wrong. Now, the blessing of Google is that when we lie about each other, our young people go to Google. And they come back to us and say, hey, it's not true what you told me. Right? So because of this, you are seeing a mass conversion of young people, Sunni young people, to Shia Islam. I'm not saying this and gloating over it. I'm just saying it's a fact because they're discovering that what they have been told all along, that Shias are not Muslims, Shias are horrible, is not true, and they're rebelling against their parents. Okay? So Google is allowing people to look beyond the headlines. Google is allowing people to look beyond the priest, the preacher, the sheikh, the imam, and the rabbi. Google is allowing us to look beyond the lies of the politicians. Right? Who believes politicians here? Anybody dares? I don't. Nobody, see? It's amazing, right? Because we know we have caught them lying time after time after time after time. So mosques, churches, synagogues are not allowed, they don't have the luxury of lying to their congregations about the other people. You remember, in Europe, what killed a lot of Jews? It was a caricature of the wandering Jew. How many of you know about it? And have you seen the picture of or the character of the wandering Jew? An ugly just the ugliest creature you can ever imagine, carrying a bag we're giving the impression that he probably stole whatever is in the bag, or there was a baby in it, where a Christian baby that he wants to kill in Yom Kippur to drink the blood. Silly things that we believe today. But when you're isolated in a village or a town, what option do you have except to believe this nonsense? Many people die because of this. Martin Luther shook the foundation of the church, not because of what he wrote. I actually think that Martin Luther was a horrible writer. He expressed himself in a horrible, horrible way. He said, if I pass gas today, the Vatican shall hear it. What kind of expression is that? That's stupid, right? But what he did is he drew a caricature of the Pope wearing a crown, somebody washing his feet, and next to it is a picture or a depiction of Jesus wearing thorns, and he's washing the feet of other people. Imagine the impact of a caricature like that. That had a great impact on people. Now, that caricature itself will be meaningless. People would laugh at it, or it probably would get about 50 likes on Facebook, right? Because people have a lot of other alternatives. They can go and research. So because of this, you're finding that lies that are made about a minority are no longer effective. The second factor that we have in this is that for the first time in history, Shias have two states. First time in history. One of them, which is Iran, an emerging regional power, and the second one is Iraq, which is a very, very wealthy country. If there are business people here and you really want to strike it rich, find a connection with Iraq. Seriously. The other day I was in Jordan. I just recently came back 2 weeks ago from Jordan, and I met with some Iraqi officials in Jordan, and they told me, today, only today, we found $20 billion in cash. Saddam had stacked away for his rainy day, right? And they said, we found it. This is cash, $20 billion. So they have a lot of money, a lot of wealth. Both of those countries are emerging powers. And that is irking some of the regional powers, not because they're Shias, but because they pose a challenge for them. So they play the Shia card. All these are Shias, we should not support them. And a lot of people die because of these games, political games. So we're seeing a balance of power in the Shia-Sunni area. We're also seeing the United States, as good as our hearts are and our intentions are around the world, if you believe that, whenever we go someplace, we create a mess. Now, the U.S. is left Iraq. I think the Iraqis are figuring it out. I think even though we hear about bombings in Iraq, I think Iraq will emerge, and this is my prediction, Iraq will emerge as the most powerful country in the Middle East. And that will create a lot of stability around the region. It depends on what happens in Syria. If Syria is destabilized, now Bashar al-Assad is a dictator. Bashar al-Assad killed a lot of people, no question about it. If he's deposed, this will happen. In the interim, you will have a leader that we in the West will put, a puppet, and we'll say he believes in democracy. That means he believes in buying our goods. He believes in peace, which means that he will submit to whatever Israel says. And we have some Israelis here, right? And and he's a great man. His people will not like a dictator. Nobody likes a dictator, right? Nobody likes a dictator. So people will continue to fight, and I believe the emergent power that will rule Syria is a power that's called Jabhat al-Nusra, which is a militant Salafi movement. And if that happens, which I predict will happen, by the way, Jordan will be destabilized, Lebanon will be stabilized, Turkey will be destabilized, and hear me out. If this happens with our, forgive me, stupid policy, foreign policy, because we're helping this scenario play out, then if we have bombings in Europe and we have bombings in Minneapolis, blame this on the bad foreign policies that we are doing in Washington today. We have created monsters all over the world because we're focused on a short-term gain. We're doing the same thing in Syria. The best thing strategically that can happen for us in Syria is that the Syrian people themselves elect their own government, and this Jabhat al-Nusra is defeated. For if it's not defeated, there will be bloodshed all around the region. and around the world. So how will it play out? I think my prediction is that we will see a spike in strife, a spike in bloodshed, but I think the future, the long-term future, looks very good in the Middle East. You see, the sad thing about the Middle East is that it's very strategic. 80% of shipments of goods around the world goes through the Middle East. 80%, incredible. That will never change because it's geography, right? The Holy Land is there, Jerusalem, everybody wants it. We can't share it, we all have to have it to ourselves, right? You know, we call it the Holy Land. We're making it into the cursed land instead of the Holy Land because we're fighting over what is holy. We shouldn't do that, but it's there. Oil is the biggest curse on the Arab and the Muslim people. I wish oil was never discovered because it's in the hands of less than 2% of the people. And the rest of the people are starving or are dying because of oil. So everybody wants the Middle East. Everybody wants a part of the Middle East. And because everybody wants a part of the Middle East, successive superpowers have attacked and occupied the Middle East. You go back as far as the Egyptians, who became before the Greeks, then the Romans, and then the Persians, and then the Arabs, and then of course, you know, the Ottomans, and then the British and the French, and today it's the U.S. who's getting sucked into that. Historically, and I teach history too, and I know we have some history teachers who here. What happened in the Middle East is that every time a superpower goes into there, it ends up being dismantled, bar none. It's the graveyard of empires. It really is. So I believe that Middle East will end up pulling out of this. I believe that the Middle East and the Muslim world will end up to be a positive power that it was at one point. But not before a lot of bloodshed, because there are many people who don't want to see that change, starting with the dictators who are there. Which dictator would want to give up? Which dictator would want to give up their power? Right? Go ahead, ma'am.
First of all, I just want to say thank you. I'm
Sure.
a Lutheran minister. Okay, my
Welcome.
daughter is sitting here, and my son-in-law next to her.
Assalamu alaikum.
Yes. My question is.
So they're Lutheran Muslims?
No, I wish there were more Lutherans as faithful as
Good.
she is.
Thank you.
Okay?
That's a great statement.
And
Thank
she
you. Let's
has
give her a
told
hand.
me that she would like I would like more Lutherans to be faithful like her, and she
Good.
said she would like more Muslims to be faithful like me.
Good.
Okay, so
She loves mommy.
my question is I've tried to follow. I'm not a historian, and history is difficult for me to follow. And a lot of times I wasn't sure what word you were saying, so
Sure.
I just hung in there as I could.
Sure.
But my question is I have always maintained that the racism, the bigotry, the prejudice in our country and indeed around the world has to do with ignorance. And so you say you see many people here who have been here before. So I'm thinking this is like a lecture, it's educational, it's Islamic media, you're trying to get information out to people. And I don't know whether this question is for you or you have a perception about this, or whether it's for the people here. If you have been coming to these lectures and have heard more about Islam, has your behavior changed? I mean, on a one-on-one with Muslims as you see them, because I know you see them. Has your relationship, has your behavior toward Muslims changed?
Minister, thank you. That's a great question, but I don't think it's directed at me, right? It's directed at some people in the audience. I'm heavily involved in interfaith dialogue, heavily. And I wholeheartedly believe that one of the best things that can happen for humanity is 100% free trade. Okay? Let me tell you why. Because we don't need each other most of the time. Most people, I live in Plymouth, and there are tens of thousands of people who live in Plymouth. I don't have an opportunity to interact with them. But the people that I've interacted with in trade, and what I mean by trade is just an overarching, business dealings, need dealings. When people trade with each other, they show the best side of each other. they show the side that's likable, and people discover that truly Abdul or Muhammad and George and Aaron are all people who are after taking care of their families, taking care of their people. They all, I'm surprised at this. I have been to 4 continents and soon will be 5 continents. And I've always found people to be exactly the same. They all want the same thing. They all have goodness in their hearts that I believe that God put in them. So when we interact with people, people discover that what I have been told is not true. I get a different impression when I interact with other people. Recently, I was invited by a colleague of mine at the University of St. Thomas, who's Catholic, to go to a debate where there were 1,000, this is true, 1,000 middle-aged white men, Knights of Columbus debate, okay? Truly, see, there was not a single woman, boring as heck, you know? So he said, would you come, there is a debate. He said, I am representing my friend. He said, I'm going to debate that Islam is a faith, a legitimate faith, and Muslims are saved. And he said, the other guy, who was another professor, he's going to debate that Muslims are going to hell, we should convert them all. Okay? So he said, would you come? I said, I'll pray, I'll do a prayer and I'll come, sure. Okay? I did, and it actually talks to exactly what you're talking about. So I walked in there, and he said, just come after dinner because there's a lot of drinking, and as a Muslim, I cannot be present where alcohol is served, right? So I walked in there, and they all have had ribs, and they drank all the beer that they can. So, you know, I don't know if you thank God for that or you should be worried about it, right? Anyway, so the debate started. And the gentleman who made the point that Allah is the God of Muslims, He's not our God, He's a different God. The Quran is all evil, and he quoted so many things from the Quran, okay? And the only thing that we should do with Muslims is convert them. The only good Muslim, he said, the only good Muslim is a converted Muslim. My friend made his points, and he said the Vatican's official statement is that Muslims believe in the same God, they worship the same God, they are saved, and he cited the document. And of course, the other gentleman rebutted by saying that we don't believe in Vatican II and everything after that. Okay? So my friend was starting to give up. Well, he said, by the way, I have a Muslim professor sitting here. Can he speak? And it felt great because I really had the attention of 1,000 heads that all turned towards me, right? Well, I got up and I spoke, and I asked very simple questions to this gentleman. I said, have you been to the Middle East? He said, no. I said, have you read the Quran? He said, no. I said, would you read the Quran? He said, absolutely not. It's an evil book. I would not read it. And I said, I'm going to address the third point that you made, which is the only thing that we should do with Muslims is to convert them. I said, I want to thank you for that, because you really, truly believe what you have is the right thing, and you want to share it with me. I said, this is great. I mean, I know that you're sincere about it, but let me address the first things. I said, any of the audience here have been to the Middle East? To my surprise, there were many servicemen who were in the Middle East. I said, any of you have been to churches? Many have been to churches. Many knew Arabic. And I said, how many of you have been to churches where the name of Allah in Arabic adorns every church out there? I had so many people who said, absolutely. Churches, Christians. You know the Bible, the Arabic Bible, it's translated into Arabic, by the way. Before it was translated into English, right? Do you know that the Arabic Bible has the name Allah more than the Quran has the name Allah? So saying Allah is a different God, we took that away from him, right? I said, you haven't read the Quran, right? And he said, no. I said, well, I have read the Quran. I know the Quran inside and out. Where is this verse that you cited? He said, I don't know. I said, where did you get it? He said, in an email. And he's a professor. Point is, I told him I know the Quran. I actually told him, I said, I will donate right now $100,000 to your organization if you find any of these verses, and I cited, that you have mentioned. They don't exist in the Quran. How is this related to what you said? Is afterwards, the debate was over, and the man, to his credit, he said, I stand corrected. I am prepared to be taught, and I'd like to have lunch with you. Never responded to my emails after that. But the point is, when the debate was done, there was a line of people, men, It took me hours to answer their questions. Many of them came to me and they said, "Thank you for coming. He was wrong in saying lies about you," basically. So when people just experienced me there, many of them have committed to say, "I'm not going to listen to one person. A human being is just like me. Why would I do that?" I always advocate to people, if you want to know about Christianity, read the Bible. If you want to know about Islam, read the Quran. I find the most cowardly people on the face of the earth are the ones who come to their congregation and say, "Be careful." You know, Muslims don't do that because we're encouraged to read the Bible. But let's say that, be careful, don't ever read the Bible. It is full of evil. I'm going to go read it if you say that. I will. And if somebody tells you the Quran is full of evil, say, "I'm going to go read it." It's very small, by the way, and cheap too. You can buy it all over the place. You can download it as PDF too for free. Read it for yourself. If people tell you, and people, we do this in our relationships. If we don't want somebody to be liked, we say, "Don't talk to that person. They're really bad." I'll go talk to them first. That's what I'll do. Because there is some agenda. And people who are weak and cowardly are the ones who say, "Don't talk to Muslims." And I've heard this. Don't talk to Muslims. Don't read the Quran. I've actually gotten an email. I was copied in an email by a friend of mine who's Roman Catholic as can be, Italian as can be, and I love him as much as I love any human being. He's a great guy. His last name is Rotendi. I mean, does it get any more Italian than this? So one of the emails one time, he always sends me this email. How can I answer this bozo? He says in his emails, right? So in this email, I saw a warning to Christian girls. Christian girls, don't ever talk to Muslim men. Many of them are handsome. You might fall in love with them and you'll have to convert to Islam then. I said, "Oh my God, did we get to stoop to that level of ignorance and fear?" Go to a mosque. Go to a synagogue. I spend a lot of time at mosques, synagogues, churches. I feel at home at all of them. Because all of us claim to love God and to want to be close to God. And if I'm secure about my faith, great. If I'm not secure about my faith, I should be going to these places to learn more. They might be right. How do I know? Or I'm very secure in my faith, right? But I'll go and share my thoughts and share the worship, share the sincerity that people have towards God. I am not the judge. God is the one who will judge everybody.
Over here.
I'm just one person, but I'd like to offer up a response to your question. I agree that a lot of misunderstandings are due to ignorance and probably even especially fear, because when people encounter others and see that their customs or ways are different, it creates a sense of fear and, maybe even about ourselves, like what are they going to think of me if I'm different from them? And the more we learn about other people's cultures and about the ideas behind their beliefs and just what drives them and what's important to them, I think, just as you were saying, that we start realizing that we're all really the same. Outwardly, we express ourselves in different customs and traditions and habits, but underlying that, there's so much the same. We all care for our families, want the best for our children, trying to do our best to be good citizens in our communities, and I've tried purposely to educate myself when I encounter people who are different from me, just so I can understand their ways more clearly, and as well as personally, I just have an intense curiosity about people. So I just love learning about people, and anyone I see who appears to have different beliefs or values or traditions than me, that just makes me more curious about them. But I also find coming to events like this helps me look at others, like especially if appearances are different. For example, if I see a Muslim woman in a headscarf, a typical reaction might be that sets her apart differently from me, so it might be intimidating in a way. So I might be afraid to approach her, like, what is she gonna think of me? How is she gonna respond to me if she's different than me? But the more I educate myself about who that woman is underneath the scarf, it makes me less afraid, less intimidated, and I just am feeling way more comfortable of just approaching her as I would any other person and just saying, "Hi, how are you doing?" or making some a funny comment in the grocery store line or something like that. But anyway, that's my experience of coming to events like this and just trying to understand different cultures and beliefs. And I think it does hugely impact a person's response to others around them when they take the time to learn about others and understand what's behind the outward actions or appearances. Yes, thank you. Outward appearances, and understand what's really going on as a person, because deep down we are really all the same.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
To put it better. I think this gentleman here, thank you for your comments. We have this gentleman, he has a question.
Yeah, I have a couple of things. What are the causes of
Islamophobia?
Phobia, and it's not just only in this country, it's also in France and
Europe,
Germany and Austria. That's one thing. And two, I would be very much interested in your interfaith dialogues, and how can we find that about them, and when
Excellent.
you all
Good. What are the causes of Islamophobia? I think actually they are very simple. The causes of Islamophobia is that a number of factors. One is that we Americans don't know Muslims. We don't know Islam. Seriously, I've been involved in interfaith dialogue for a long, long time, and I'm still surprised at the surprise of many professors or ministers in churches who say, "That was wonderful. I didn't know that you guys believed in Jesus." How many times do we have to say that, right? For God's sake, go do Google what do Muslims believe about Jesus. Just do it. Google it. You'll find a lot of articles, and you'll be surprised at everybody else, right? So ignorance is the biggest enemy that we have all around the world. Ignorance of who Muslims are. Another factor is that, as Martin Luther said, if he passes gas, the Pope or the Vatican shall hear it. If a Muslim passes gas somewhere, all of us are going to hear about it. I do this exercise with my students at the university. I give them a story, whatever story I find in the paper. I give them a story about some kids who were camping. And one of the scouts abused one of the children. Oh no, actually he just went crazy and started shooting in California many years ago. And I said I wanted to take the story and make one of the scouts, the abuser, to be a Muslim, how the story would change. It would have been headline in CNN. It would have been all around the world. The BBC would have carried it. France Press would have carried it. Everybody would have carried it. And this bozo was a bozo. It didn't matter that he was a Muslim. He just did what he did because he's a criminal. Like this guy in DC. You know what I believe that the driver because behind what he did, what his motive was? He was refused citizenship. He couldn't be in the US Olympics team. So he did something to justify what he did. He tied it to Islam. The other day, I was having lunch with one of my Catholic colleagues, professor, and he said, we Muslims suffer from a syndrome. That's a problem. And he said, what is it? I said, in all honesty, and forgive the example, it's really graphic. We don't have any children here, not that I know of, right? I said, if you find a Muslim prostitute around the corner and you say, Salaam alaikum, how is it going? She would say, praise the Lord, they had a great business day. So they all tie it to faith. Well, they don't know anything about faith. So Muslims contribute to this because if I want to do something, really seriously, if I want to do something, I always say God has something to do with it. Many of the things that we do them because we choose to do them. Because we're stupid or smart or whatever. That's what God gave us the choice to do what we do. So the causes of Islamophobia are ignorance of the general community of who Muslims are. The general population lumps a Shafi'i, an Ash'ari, a Hanbali, a Shia, an Ismaili Shia, all of them lump them together with Wahhabis, with Salafis. They're vastly different than each other. Much like Catholics and Lutherans have differences. How many common things do Baptists have with Catholics? I've sat down with Baptists who said, I became Christian, I used to be Catholic. I did. honestly, you know. So we do, I mean, so the lack of knowledge about what Islam is devastating to Islam. Who drives this? Religious elements do drive this. You know, the far Christian right. They don't want people to know what Islam's believe about Jesus. They're afraid that people will convert. That's so silly. So what if 10% of the population converts to Islam? Does that really change anything? What if 1%, 2%, you know? Does that, you know, according to Time magazine, 30,000 Americans have been converting to Islam every year. Do you feel that? Is it changing anything on the ground? That fear-mongering is what is driving all of this. And also, politics of the Middle East. You know, we need to be there. Why? Because these people will bomb us here. The other day I heard from somebody who says, if we didn't go into Iraq, we would have had 9, I don't know why 9 September 11 attacks since then. Completely nonsense. Complete nonsense. But somebody makes a statement in front of my dentist, by the way. He was a patient too, you know. And my dentist is a dentist. He's a great dentist, but he has no knowledge of the Middle East or politics or Islam or probably Christianity. The only thing that he knows about is his boat in Lake Minnetonka. That's the average American. And it's true in his case. I mean, he admitted that. I'm repeating his statement, you know. So when we have this level of ignorance makes for a great environment to spread lies. Great environment to spread lies. And in the Middle East, I'll get to your question in a minute. In the Middle East, we have our ignorance there too. Seriously. In the Middle East, I guarantee you, if you're driving and you speed and the cop stops you, it's an American conspiracy against my Muslim brother. Isn't it true? I mean, there is so much of this that whatever happens that we cannot explain, people there would say it's America. And why is America doing it? Because of the Crusades. They're continuing the Crusades. You laugh. But they also laugh at the silly things that we say about them. You know, you want to go to the Middle East, you want to get everybody to laugh, is just sit down in front of a room full of women, Muslim women, wearing the hijab, and say Muslim women are oppressed. They will laugh so hard at you. But it's a statement that is repeated often. And when people repeat the same statements often, milk will become black in color. That's what happens to us. And your second question is about interfaith dialogue. The Muslim-Christian interfaith dialogue at the University of St. Thomas is the leading interfaith dialogue in the 5-state area, and it's becoming the leading interfaith dialogue around the world. We have dialogue going on with Turkey, with Egypt, with Iran. We have interfaith dialogue going on with many, many sides that the US government couldn't get to. We had a conference last year around this time with a top Iranian delegation that came to the Vatican. We prayed together, we dialogued together, we did so many wonderful things together. We visited the Vatican and everybody was stunned. We had an Ayatollah with us. I was just a big guy. I mean, he's just an overarching personality, overpowering personality. But he was such a gentleman that he just loved everything around him. He saw a mother pushing her baby in a cart, and he went to the baby. Iranian culture, they were so warm. He stopped the mother. He didn't speak Italian, spoke some English. And he stopped without even saying anything to the mother, took a picture of the baby, smiled at the baby, gave her a little gift. I think it was a flower that he picked, gave to the baby. And the mother just loved that. And then one day we stayed at a monastery. In a monastery, there is a beautiful church where people hold weddings. So first I was walking with him and he saw a man, an older man, holding the arm of this beautiful bride. And he said, this is not right. He's too old for her. I said, no, that's her father. He didn't know. So he said, oh, so what happens? So I explained to him, he walks in and, they take step by step. And then, there are some words that are exchanged. And then he hands her hand over to the man. He said, this is so beautiful. So I said, yeah, and we're watching. The father started walking with the bride, and the Ayatollah with his big white amama, turban, started walking with them. I had to hold him back and said, look, you can't do this. You have to be invited, and also, this is just a family. He was so disappointed because he really wanted to live that experience. My colleagues here, including Lois, who's our secretary, she said, I have never find a warmer person than this Ayatollah. And she said, and if I saw him in a picture in CNN, he would have been, they would show a picture of him being angry and saying some really anti-American sentiments or statements, and we would show him as the enemy, the absolute enemy. He is anything but the enemy. So interfaith dialogue is absolutely important. That's where you can find us. We have so many events throughout the year. Please join us there. We'd love to have you. Go ahead, ma'am. You young lady, yes. No, down here.
Well, thanks. I don't know. I followed the Middle East for many years and traveled there and really enjoy the people of the region. But I do think that religion is used in America with the foreign policy now. It's the duty to protect is being used and has been used for that America needs to protect and go into these other countries. And that is, I know there's a speaker next week over at the Humphrey Institute who may defend this, because it's a question, one of the 12 or 10 questions, topics this year that the Foreign Policy Association is addressing. And I think that's a dangerous, the way it's presented, because the way it's been used, we often can get into these difficulties thinking we're doing the right thing, and it's based on religion often.
Yeah.
Christian, I mean, religion, or Jewish.
You raise a very, very interesting point. Do we use religion to drive our decisions in the Middle East? You know, I probably would disagree with you. Not this current administration. I don't think I think the current administration, let's not confuse between pro-Israeli policy and say that that's pro-Jewish policy. Our policy is pro-Israeli because the Israeli lobby is very powerful, very sophisticated. There is no other lobby like it, okay? Probably the only other lobby that comes close to it is the NRA, okay? I mean, it's true. It is true. We're a country that we don't need guns. We have great laws. Why would we have to have guns? But anyway, the lobby is very strong that affects our policies. The Israeli lobby is very powerful. So there are some people, especially in the Christian right, who try to play that card to solicit aid, help, to go to the Holy Land and do whatever they do. And I bet you some of the Jewish people are very leery about them, because they say flat out, when Jesus comes, he's either going to convert you or kill you. It's not a flattering outcome that they're hoping for. But there has been a shift, a great shift in our foreign policy vis-a-vis faith with the Obama administration that most American people cannot notice. Not only do not notice, but cannot notice, which is President Obama, as much as most of us have voted for him, President Obama grew up with Muslim students. He went to Muslim schools, so he had his own influences. I'm not saying he's a Muslim. He says he's not, so he's not for me, you know. President Obama leans heavily towards the policies of Saudi Arabia and the Persian Gulf countries like Qatar and Bahrain. Because of this, his policies effectively take sides in the conflicts in the Middle East, and we are looking now like we're siding with Sunni Muslims against Shia Muslims. This is not the intended policy, foreign policy, of the American people. American people, we as American people, let me just speak as an American for a minute, we have absolutely no benefit in getting involved in those conflicts. If we do, they will spill over here and we'll become the biggest victims. We cannot take sides. We should not take sides. In fact, if anything, we should play the role of a mediator, although we are not trusted there, as you know. You've been to the Middle East. Nobody trusts us there as Americans. But if anything, we should play the role of the mediator. The least that we should do is get out of the conflict, any conflict that has to do with anything, Shia and Sunnis, and let the Shias and Sunnis resolve it. They will. They know how to overcome these issues. Now, I promised this young lady here to her question, so go ahead.
I have two questions for you, and perhaps you'll find them to be related. I must ask, as an American Muslim, how do you manage paying taxes to support current policies, which you expressed your opinion on, in the Middle East? And secondly, how does Shia and Sunni practice significantly differ?
Good.
Repeat the question, Abu Ahmed.
The first question, they're not interrelated. The first question is, as a practicing Muslim, how do I manage paying taxes that support policies I disagree with? And the second question is, how do Shias and Sunnis practice differently? Okay. The first question is, see, I just came back from the North America Shia Scholar Conference. I'm a member of that conference. And we talked about how do we deal with supporting a candidate who would advocate something that goes against the faith, whatever it is. How do we do that? And we all discussed it, and we all came to the same conclusion that actually came from Grand Ayatollah Sistani, is that when Muslims live in a community where they're not the majority, or they are an equal number to all other majorities, then what you have to live by is the collective agreement that we agree on. And the collective agreement that we all adhere to is the Constitution. So if the Constitution says pay taxes, if it does, a derivative of the Constitution says pay taxes, then we pay taxes. Do I agree with pay taxes that would go and kill not only Muslims, anybody? It's all the same. Do I agree with taxes that would go and harm a forest because that's against the teachings of Islam? What do I do about that? I resent those policies, but I cannot not pay taxes because I have to live by the collective agreement. Now, if I can find enough members of the community, not the Muslim community, but the community that we all agreed together to live by the Constitution, to not pay taxes through due process, then I'm obligated to support that group. But today, the only people who don't want to pay taxes are the Tea Party, and they don't like Muslims, right? So the second part of the question, I promise I'm coming to you. The second part of the question is that on the surface, Shias and Sunnis, we go to each other mosques, we pray together. There are very fine differences where we pray. In our prayer, we put our hands down, they put their hands like this. We pray on something on the ground or something from the ground. They believe it's okay to pray on material or carpet. The pilgrimage is the same. Fasting is for the most part is the same. The differences are very, very minor. For an outsider, they can hardly see them. In fact, for most Muslims, they cannot see them. Does it make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. Go ahead, sir.
Professor, this is more of a democratic issue. Relative to the conversions, you say within the United States, about 30,000 individuals convert to Islam during a given year. And looking at what happened in the Arab Spring and so forth with the youth movements in the Middle East, are you looking at this really being a demographic more of the youth under, let's say, under 21, under 24, and also with some of the radicalization issues that seem to be occurring? How do you see that playing out over a long term, let's say?
A fantastic question. Some statistics that you can check on the OIC website. The OIC is the organization, OIC, excuse me, Organization of Islamic Countries, which has 54 member countries. The statistics there are absolutely amazing and revealing. 70% of Muslims are under the age of 30. Listen to this. 67% of Arabs were born since 1987. Now compare this to all other populations, however you look at them. Europe is declining in population. Asian population. In numbers, Russia has an existential threat. The only population that's growing in Russia is the Muslim population. If you look at China, by design, they're trying to control their growth. India is trying to do the same thing. So truly, the only populations that are growing in the world are the Muslim populations, and infant death mortality is declining in the Muslim world sharply. So basically, if you've been to the Middle East, if you go to the streets of Amman, the streets of Cairo, the streets of Tunisia, or wherever you go, Malaysia, most of the people that you see are young. Most of the people you see are young people. I really feel old when I go there because I'm part of the old generation now. While here, I come to Plymouth, I tend to be in the younger part of the generation. And that's reflective of how we are. Birth rate in the US is 1.3%. This by itself, for those of you who don't know, is an existential threat to our way of life. We need to increase this to close, I believe it was to double it at least, to maintain the standard of living, to have enough labor in our population. This is affecting something else, which is R&D budgets. Older populations, we want to retire, we want to go to Mazatlan, we want to go buy our boats, right? We want to do that stuff. We are not necessarily interested in new gadgets, in new innovations, just by the nature of where we stand in our lives. We're interested in a good quality of life now. Healthcare is important to us. Vacation, entertainment is very important to us. But we really, how many of us really worry about how the iPhone 10 is going to look like? Right? While R&D budgets in the world today, listen to this, they're declining in the US. They are highest today in 3 countries: Turkey, Iran, and Saudi Arabia. Because they have younger populations and they want to find jobs, keep these younger people entertained. They have to pay attention to the future of these younger people. This affects who is going to be the leaders of the future too. You know, all you have to do is come to the University of Minnesota, University of St. Thomas, or Berkeley, or Stanford. Isn't it true that most doctors, but most computer engineers have accents today? It's true, you know, not because they're smarter. That's not true. It's not. But the interest in innovation comes from other parts of the world, primarily from the Muslim world, just because I don't know what the factors, what led Muslims to be the younger populations. I haven't studied that. So this affects a number of other factors. One of them is politics. You know, older populations in the US, so we do have a two-party system we call democracy. It's working out for us, right? How many older people do you see in the street with the Occupy movement? How many people? Yeah. How many people demonstrated against the Vietnam War who are older people? How many people are active in our own politics in the street who are older people, except the ones who, you know, have a lot of money and they want to donate because their wives or kids or husbands or cousins told them to? Most of the people who are involved are younger people. People who are interested in long-term policy are younger people, driven by their own future. They want jobs. They want to marry. They want to have families. They want to have a good future. So in the Arab world, where dictatorships, and listen to what I'm going to say, dictatorships have been imposed on us by the post-colonial powers, younger people are looking for change. And when they look for change, if they cannot affect change by way of the vote, they'll go to the next step. Can they demonstrate? They will if they could, as they did in Egypt. If they're not allowed to demonstrate, they're going to take rocks and they're going to throw them at you. If they're not allowed to take rocks and throw them at you, they're going to burn themselves to get other people's attention. If they're not allowed to do that, they're going to look to the nearest movement that will say, I'll give you a weapon to get rid of this dictator. And now, as part of this, people rise. We have interests. This is the conflict. We have interests. So when people hear this, who want to do change, and they cannot do it by demonstration, now they can. They cannot do it by vote. They cannot do it by rock. What are they going to do? They're going to turn violent, and not justifying violence. I hate violence. But this is what happens. They're going to turn violent against their own people and against anything that's American in their way, because they have been told constantly that we protect dictators, and for a long time we have. The only dictators we don't like are the dictators who don't like us. Isn't it true? Who was it, the president who said about a South American dictator? He said, it's true he's a dictator, but he is our son of a bitch dictator. He's our dictator. He does exactly what we want him to do. Genevieve, you have a question? I hope I answered your question. The future looks tense. We have to play the games right. We are not playing the games right. That's the bottom line.
Well, I wanted to thank you for your talk. I've appreciated it, especially, you know, you've gone into some of the, many of the things you've raised about the differences between Sunni and Shia, and how they're very similar along, you know, the history of Christianity, and how very similar theological debates have taken place. So I really found that interesting. And I actually kind of have two questions that you just brought up, an extra one. So, but when you were talking about how like post-colonial, you know, policies throughout the world have kind of resulted in us putting it, or not just us, but you know, the West or whoever putting in.
We inherited. The U.S. inherited that order.
Right.
We didn't put it. Yeah.
Well, and I'm specifically interested. Okay, so like for instance, following World War I, the fall of the Ottoman Empire, Saudi Arabia, the Saudi family, came to power in Saudi Arabia largely because of these, these exact policies. So I'm kind of curious, what the future you see of for a country like Saudi Arabia and their family and whatnot. But beyond kind of this global stuff, I'm really also interested here in the community, and in the American media, we often see depictions of Muslims or Muslim families or whatnot, through the Taliban or through the Saudi family or through Al-Qaeda or whatever. So what I'm interested in hearing is and I don't know necessarily if you have the positionality for this, but to talk about, perceptions of the many diffuse Muslim families, and especially maybe the kids that are in high school or that are in junior high that, who either may be immigrants themselves or sons and daughters of immigrants, and how they might deal with both being, kind of going through that process that every immigrant generation goes through of Americanization, while also trying to wrestle with their own, their own traditional family backgrounds and whatnot.
I can write a book about that. The prediction of what will happen, the status quo in the Middle East, in the Arab world, will not continue. There's no way. It's not sustainable. That's why you're seeing what you're seeing, the Arab Spring or whatever we want to call it. There is so much that populations can't put up with, and for so long. So the whole order in the Middle East will change. And now you have many players who are trying to make it change their way. We are playing our game. We have every right to, because it's very strategic to us as Americans. You have the Europe, who is greatly affected by what happens in the Middle East. Let me give you this. If North Africa stabilizes and flourishes, Europe shuts down. Because most of the labor in Europe comes from North Africa and from Turkey. And a lot of the Turks abandoned the European economy and went back to Turkey. So Europe will absolutely be sucked down. So Europe has its own influences that it has to have on North Africa and the Middle East to have a certain outcome that goes its way. You have Israel, which is really truly a Western country in the middle of the Middle East in all aspects, that it has its own concerns about what would happen in the future if the Middle East map is to change, and it will change again. The Saudi regime will go. There is no question about it. Now, when you look at Saudi Arabia, you're hearing voices. You're seeing voices that want change. Many Saudi intellectuals in London, in the US, in Europe in general, and now out of Lebanon, are calling for regime change in Saudi Arabia. One of them will emerge as victorious. What I hope is that we have, I don't want to say moderate, I want to say smart leadership come there, because when we say moderate, we say pro-American, we mean pro-American. I hope that we have devoted Muslims who are globalists in their thinking, who understand that Saudi oil is worth nothing without our cars, who understand that peace in the whole area depends on what Saudi Arabia does in the conflicts that are around. Syria, what will happen in Syria, all of this will change the Middle East map. In 20 years, the Middle East will look different. That's why we need strategic thought leaders in Washington to think long term. How do we redefine ourselves in the Middle East? And instead of being the chess masters that we have in the Middle East, those times are going away. There used to be a time where people thought that America was a great friend, that shifted to America is the country that controls our future, to now America is the evil power of the Middle East. We need to change that impression. I don't believe it's true, by the way, but we do evil things that wipe out everything else that we do. You know what I mean? So that's what we have to do this. As far as Muslim immigrants, many of the Muslims that are born here, well, all the Muslims that are born here are first-generation Americans. They are as ignorant as everybody else about where Saudi Arabia is. How many of you saw the map that was published by Fox News? they put Iraq, Egypt, I don't know, a number of other countries, and they put the name of Egypt on Iraq. And you can tell the people who really believe Fox News, they should have a problem with that, but they didn't know that that wasn't Egypt, right? Now, many of our children, Muslims, are just as ignorant as everybody else. They know about Xboxes, they know about iPhones, they have little knowledge about what is going on outside of our borders. Those who do either are born to parents who are involved in politics or care about politics, and of course, most of the time they lean or are affected by how their parents think. I actually wholeheartedly believe that immigrant Muslims can take a great example and learn a great deal from African American Muslims. Because African American Muslims are good American citizens who are good Muslims, and they have a great influence in our communities. You know, some of the problems that our kids have around the nation are drug problems. I mean, my kids go to Wayzata High School. Great, big, sophisticated, very good school. They have a drug problem. You know, in the suburbs we have drug problems, right? Or we don't. Or is it just black people who do? Do we tell ourselves that? I think a lot of people like to think that way. But the truth is, drug problems are everywhere. Where African American Muslims are active, they don't have drug problems. They have very safe communities, very great communities. Immigrant Muslims need to learn from them. We need to go to them and say, how do we do this? We're new to the communities here. How do we integrate? But we're finding that immigrant Muslims tend to go into virtual villages of their own. Here in the Twin Cities, for instance, if you want Middle Eastern food, where do you go quickly? Central Avenue, Holy Land, right? Right? That's the case in every city that we have. If you want to go to mosques, they're cluttered in some certain areas. I mean, Central Avenue, you don't even have to learn English. You can live there forever, speaking your language. That is a problem that we have. It's not only Muslims who have this problem. People don't notice the Christian communities who travel or who move here from the Middle East. In the Twin Cities, we have East Orthodox Christians, Arab Christians. They have their own churches. Their sermons are in Arabic. Their food is tabbouleh and kebab or whatever it is, kibani or whatever Lebanese people eat. We have a Lebanese guy sitting back there, you know. So they congregate together. They open schools by themselves. This phenomenon was experienced by every single immigrant community throughout. You go to Chicago. Who do you find in Chicago? What kind of people? Polish, Irish, Italians, New York, Italians, Jews, right? I mean, that's how it is. People come and they tend to congregate in every sense of the word. We're going through a phase, like every other community, but though we are seeing the change from closed communities to truly Americanized communities that happen to be Muslim. And I think that's a good thing. But until we get there, we're going to have problems. Problems where, a criminal who wants to blow up something because he didn't get his citizenship, he says, praise the Lord, I'll do it, like that prostitute example that I gave you. Genevieve, this is your turn. I have to give her that question.
So as I think back on my experience of growing up in America and kind of my misconceptions that I have had about Islam, and I'm still learning a lot about the faith today, one of the main things that is kind of held up by the public media as being, why Islam is so bad, air quotes, is the subjugation of women. And so my understanding of the faith, as the faith is that women are equal, and all of the women that wear hijab do so as their own, at their own decision. But what I'm curious about in the context of Shia and Sunni is, what are the main differences in how women are treated, and what are some of the justifications that come out for that? Mm-hmm. And I understand that's a big question.
It is a big question, but it's a good question. See, Shia communities today geographically are located, as I said, in Iran, in Iraq, in Lebanon, in eastern part of Saudi Arabia, Bahrain. Those are the areas in Azerbaijan. Those are, relative to the other areas, are more liberal areas. For instance, you take Iran. Iran has more women representatives in their elected body than we've ever had in the Congress or the Senate. Iran has women race car drivers before we had that woman who was in, what do you call it? What is it called? In NASCAR, thank you, yes. Way before. And she's a hero and she's a national hero. But we don't pay attention to that. Iran has 54% of college students are women. You know, they are scientists, they're doctors, they're college students, they are VPs to the president, they are everywhere that you can imagine. That is reflective of the jurisprudence of Shias. Shias say that women can be political leaders, they can be obviously teachers, they can be business people, they can be religious scholars, they can be whatever they want to be, basically. Sunnis have a more conservative approach to this. For instance, Sunnis say that women cannot be judges. And the reason that they do this, and I think we have limited time, they have to kick us out of here. The reason that the Sunnis have this reaction to women is that they ruled in areas that are more conservative. Saudi Arabia prevents women from driving. They don't cite or assert any religious text. They just say it's more appropriate for our community. I don't think it is. I think the men there are horrible drivers, right? But they have their own reasons. The problem that Muslims have generally is that whatever we do, we attribute it to the faith. We take our faith truly, and the minister, I hope you don't get mad at me for this, but seriously, Muslims take their faith more seriously than anybody else. So whatever we do, we say, well, what does God want us to do with this? And does God want me to drive? Does God want my wife to drive? Does God want women to vote? You know? And the answer is either yes or no, based on the geography that you're in or the sect that you follow. Generally speaking, Shias practically, and according to their jurisprudence, are a lot more liberal when it comes to that. I know it's a long answer, but we can talk more.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm afraid I have an even broader question. You focused much of your presentation on the Middle East and then also, by extension, on America. But I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the texture of Islam in other parts of the world, say from Kosovo on the one hand to Nigeria, Somalia on another, or perhaps Indonesia as well.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
And I know that's a very large question, but maybe just a very broad brushstroke and perhaps some suggestion of resources to follow that up with.
Yes, absolutely. The site that I highly recommend for everybody to go to is www.al-islam.org. It's managed and vetted by a group of Stanford scientists. Okay, I have to warn you, it has a Shia leaning, but it really is very educational. It has a lot of resources out there. It's al-islam.org. Now, Muslims in Malaysia, Indonesia, India, Bangladesh, and Europe, and North America all have their own personalities. They're united in the sense that they have a common language, which is the greetings, the prayers, the fasting, the pilgrimage. They do all of this stuff. So they immediately have so many things in common. The set of beliefs are almost the same. But I find people in Malaysia and Malaysia, in Africa, in Indonesia, to have kind of the same personality, which is a more peaceful personality, a less tense personality. And that's reflective of their history as well. The way they converted to Islam, they didn't convert by conquest. They converted by trade. They interacted with Muslims, they liked Islam, they became Muslims. That's what happened. So they really are different. Their outlook in Islam is much different. Now, the people who come from areas where Islam conquered those lands, they, generally speaking, you find them to be more tense, more reactive to things. Somebody said something bad about the Prophet, they're immediately burning the American flag, in the street. They are not as amiable when it comes to the approach of how to deal with these things. We don't have time to go into all the details, but the primary reason behind that is the history of their land and how Islam came to fruition in those areas. Sure thing. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you for coming.
Last few notes. We're going to start having lunch. Of course, the volunteers, if you could please facilitate to give the lunch, especially the dietaries, to the ones who requested it. And we will rearrange the chairs so we can sit together. Sorry if we didn't get to your question. You saw me contesting with the speaker as much as I could. So sorry about that, but you can ask questions over lunch. We're going to try to make sure that in your table you will have a Muslim sitting with you. We ask you for the feedback sheet. We rely on those crucially. Please, the feedback sheet, we will need them. And after the lunch, please help yourself to all the materials that we have. We have free books, free CDs, DVDs, all kinds of things. And we really thank you for coming.